In this final segment on the Industrial Revolution, we will look at the close link between industrialization and imperialism. We will also consider some of the ways imperialism has been accomplished by different countries and the ways imperialism is justified. The rise of imperialism in the 19th century was largely propelled by the industrial demands of nations such as England. Consider the British Empire's reliance on textiles, particularly cotton textiles. England, lacking domestic cotton production, initially sourced cotton from the American colonies and then the U.S. South. During and after the Civil War, this supply became unreliable, prompting England to seek cotton from alternative sources like Egypt and India. This shift illustrates a key aspect of imperialism: the control of resources through military power. England, technologically superior to India, was able to assert control over Indian cotton supplies, epitomizing imperialism's essence as a quest for resources and markets. The cycle involved importing cotton from India and then selling the manufactured textiles back to India, essentially making India a source of wealth for England. The American approach to imperialism differed somewhat. Rather than direct colonial rule, the United States generally exercised control over other countries' economies. This distinction stems from America's initial lack of necessity to seek resources and markets outside the North American continent, thanks to abundant resources in the West and a growing domestic market. The economic aspects of imperialism were often justified by a supposed moral dimension. This justification can take forms like claiming better utilization or management of resources, or the imposition of supposed superior ways of living and governance. This notion is encapsulated in the concept of the white man's burden, as coined by Rudyard Kipling, reflecting a belief in European and subsequently American superiority and the obligation to civilize other nations. This mindset is not limited to Europe. It parallels the American doctrine of manifest destiny and the belief in spreading American ideals. However, such beliefs are often seen as masking economic and strategic interests. For instance, the U.S. interventions in countries like Iraq and Libya, ostensibly for promoting democracy, coincided with these nations' strategic and resource significance, contrasting with the lack of intervention in places like Rwanda, despite severe humanitarian crises there. These seemingly contradictory motives for U.S. intervention in foreign countries, economic gain versus spreading liberty, have caused many, both outside and within the United States, to characterize American foreign policy as hypocritical, using moral rationalizations to justify economic exploitation. But we must consider that there has existed since the Washington administration divergent views of what kind of country the United States is. Is the U.S. a great industrial power or a beacon of liberty? That question has never been definitively answered, and at different times in our history, government policy has been guided by one proposition or the other. When considering U.S. foreign policy in terms of imperialist predator versus champion of liberty, we must conclude the U.S. is both. It is not hypocritical. It reflects the dual nature of America's self-identity. Finally, the 19th century presented a stark dichotomy between modernized and non-modernized nations. Modernization, in this context, meant adopting Western characteristics of liberalism and industrialization. This created a predicament where nations had to either modernize or face colonization. A poignant example is China, which, despite being a leading global power in the early 19th century, faced division into spheres of influence by the early 20th century due to its resistance to modernization. Conversely, Japan's deliberate modernization during the Meiji era prevented colonization, but also transformed it into an imperial power. By the beginning of the 20th century, virtually every part of the Earth worth colonizing that was not modernized was controlled by Western powers. This concludes our exploration of the Industrial Revolution. As we proceed through the course, knowing the events and concepts introduced here will prove foundational for understanding the progress of American history. Your discussion topic requires viewing a video that will show how some of these theoretical ideas we have discussed here translate to the lives of people living through this period in the United States. Please proceed to answer the questions in the assignment on Canvas. If you have any questions, you can post them in the open forum discussion or contact the professor using Canvas email.